And it's interesting, with the backdrop of Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, saying that that right to work and attacking prevailing wage has been harmful to West Virginia. It's interesting that Montana, some of the Republicans in Montana, shot this down. Now, I personally thought that they were going to be able to ram this through. They got a first time in 16 years. They've got a Republican governor. First time they've had that opportunity. They got the Republican legislature. It looked like all the ducks were in a row for another state to fall to the dreaded no rights at work agenda. But today they stopped it. And you go, that's a great thing. And it is. It's a great thing that they were able to stop another bad piece of legislation. And understand, during the election, they tried to steer away from it. They tried to, didn't want anybody to know, kind of like Wisconsin did back in 2010. It was nowhere on the radar. Nobody was talking about it. But there it is. I mean, we're how far into this term? Now there was, I guess, a blip. The candidate for lieutenant governor evidently said during a campaign stop that the governor now, this Greg Gianforte, that he would not veto a right to work bill. Said it wasn't a priority. That was the excuse that they gave when they were confronted with, well, it's not really a priority. We find out it is. And again, this is another one of those moments where you're not surprised much by what we see, because this is who they are. It's what they do. And this wasn't the only horrible piece of legislation that was banging its way through the Montana legislature. The Senate had a couple of pieces of legislation. Senate Bill 228, that was going to expand how many times you can withdraw from a public sector union. In the world of Janus now, you can sign up. You sign up at the beginning of the year. Once a year, you have the opportunity to opt out. That's kind of how things have gone. Now they want to expand that to twice. That was shot down. That was an even vote of 25-25. Also, Senate Bill 89, they wanted to ram through a piece of legislation stating that the states weren't going to collect the union dues. They wouldn't have the dues check off, which they tried here in Pennsylvania for a bit. And I kept asking, the legislator who was pushing this, how much money it would save, because the argument was at the time, well, we're giving those unions free money. We're doing free work for them. And I simply asked how much it would cost, because I was willing to pay it. How much does it cost to write a line of code? How much is that? Is it $100? $500? How much is that to write the line of code? And he couldn't come up with a number. So I said, obviously, if you can't come up with a number, if you can't, tell me how much it costs, then how do you know it cost anything? Because you do a bunch of those things for a bunch of organizations. Why is this one different? Oh yeah. It's about attacking your so-called enemy, the workers. But that got shot down as well, and that's a good thing. It got shot down 28-22 in their Senate. And the thing is this isn't obviously going to be the last time we hear about that in Montana or where I'm at in Pennsylvania. I've said before, and I am on the record, that I believe if things go the wrong way, 2022, it's a midterm election. We've got a governor, a Democratic governor who served 2 terms. It looks like the arrows are pointing towards a Republican governor. We've already got a solid Republican legislature. Right to work will happen in Pennsylvania in 23 faster than it's ever happened anywhere else. Unless people wake up and say, no, this isn't what we want. This should be the issue in 2022 for people in Pennsylvania. Because, and now understand, the Republican gubernatorial candidate will play it down. Oh no, we love our Republican friends, because they're trying to go all Trumpian, and Republicans are. They're trying to be a little friendlier. We really care about you, until they jab you in the back. And that's the interesting thing. And, I had a listener today send me an email frantically, Have you seen this video? And it's a video of Walmart doing their union busting thing. And it opened up this conversation and back and forth about what was going on in Montana, what's going to happen in Pennsylvania, and how this has been rolling out for the last couple of decades. These attacks on workers and in unions aren't new. I think what is new? Joe Biden. I think what is new is the fact that Joe Biden actually had the courage to come out and say something that no president in my lifetime has ever had the courage to come out and say. And I got to play this. I promised the listener I would. So here's Joe Biden's statement from Sunday night.
I've long said America wasn't built by Wall Street. It was built by the middle class, and unions built the middle class. Unions put power in the hands of workers. They level the playing field. They give you a stronger voice for your health, your safety, higher wages, protections from racial discrimination and sexual harassment. Unions lift up workers, both union and non-union, and especially black and brown workers. I've made it clear when I was running that my administration's policy would be to support unions organizing and the right to collectively bargain. I'm keeping that promise. You should all remember, the National Labor Relations Act didn't just say that unions are allowed to exist. It said that we should encourage unions. So let me be really clear. It's not up to me to decide whether anyone should join a union. But let me be even more clear. It's not up to an employer to decide that either. The choice to join a union is up to the workers. Full stop. Full stop. Today and over the next few days and weeks, workers in Alabama and all across America are voting on whether to organize a union in their workplace. This is vitally important, a vitally important choice as America grapples with the deadly pandemic, the economic crisis, and the reckoning on race. What it reveals the deep disparities that still exist in our country. And there should be no intimidation, no coercion, no threats, no anti-union propaganda. No supervisor should confront employees about their union preferences. Every worker should have a free and fair choice to join a union. The law guarantees that choice. And it's your right, not that of an employer. It's your right. No employer can take that right away. So make your voice heard. God bless you all, and may God protect the workers and their families who are trying to figure out how to make it fairly. Thank you.
I got to tell you, coming from a sitting president, that is huge. And as I said the last time I played it, that's why I voted for Joe Biden right there. If there was ever a reason for me to vote for a president, that was it right there in a nutshell. And the thing that gets me is, and look, I got a bunch of emails around this, and this has really sparked a discussion around what employers have been getting away with. I had a listener, like I said, frantically sending me this email of Walmart in their union busting video, saying, oh, wow, have you seen this video? And I'm going, yeah, about 10 years ago. None of this stuff is new. None of these tactics are new. And, it's one of those things where, we've all seen them. Target has them. They've all got them. You don't need a union to represent you. You can do it yourself. You can come talk to us. You can negotiate with us. We love you. We're here for you. Our door is always open. How many times have you heard that? Our door is always open. We value your input. You're our most valued asset. How many times have you heard that stuff? How many times have you heard, oh my goodness, we couldn't do this without you. Oh, thank goodness. But yet when you have an actual concern, an actual complaint, never seems to get addressed. And I point to this letter that, again, I've gotten a lot of contact around. This guy who worked for Trader Joe's had a suggestion, and a fairly detailed one, saying, look, I think you're letting us down. You're not keeping us safe in this moment of pandemic. And he went through and said, here are ways I think, and my coworker think, you can help us be safer on the job. And he was very articulate, didn't call names, didn't, no wild accusations. Said, look, we have this strategy. We should be up doing this. We should be doing things that keep us safe and the customers, of course, like improving filtration, like increasing the air change per hour, like limiting the store capacity and the CO2 levels. There are ways that you can track that stuff because, hey, if you want customers to come back, maybe not be the place where they got sick, probably not a bad idea, not a bad suggestion, right? Little things like saying, look, you got to wear a mask in the store. It's good for us. It's good for you. It is what it is. And he went on to say, look, we should have a 3 strikes and you're out policy. We shouldn't have to argue with the same person every day. It shouldn't have to come to violent confrontations or whatever. And, he was very, very, very professional in his writing. Now, here's the thing. This is a young guy. When I was 22, that's not how I would have written it. Not even close. So Trader Joe's does what a big corporation would do. They fired him. And you go, how can they do that? Well, Trader Joe's in their termination letter, because it says in big bold letters, termination, your employment is at will, which means Trader Joe's may terminate it without cause or notice. Store management will determine the appropriate action based on the particular facts and circumstances. Should you disagree in any way with the information contained in this document, you may submit a written statement explaining your position. This statement will be added to your personnel file. You've already been terminated. It is the termination. You are done. Out the door. Goodbye. Because, as they say, you clearly do not understand our values. And as a result, we are no longer comfortable with having you work for Trader Joe's. He made a suggestion on how to keep himself and his coworkers safe. Now, I believe this is concerted action. I believe this is going to be covered under the NLRB, and I think some very ambitious lawyer will pursue this, and there will be lawsuits, as there should be. This should never happen. But this, for me, is issue number one. And let me clarify that real quick. Had he written this by himself, they'd have gotten away with it, I think. The fact that he included someone else, that is concerted action. They want to make themselves safer. That is a smart thing. I'm all in favor of it. Good stuff. But had he done it alone, there's no cause. And this is one of those reasons that I say every person should be a union member. You should only be fired if you screw something up. You should only be fired if you're doing a terrible job, not if you had a suggestion. Because remember, all of us have worked for places that say, we value your opinion. Share your suggestions. We value you. And the thing is I look at what's going on down at Amazon. And again, another one of those places who's put out the videos and tons of, hey, we care. Hey, come to us. We can talk. We have an open door policy. Yeah. What we're seeing out of the campaign down there, constant harassment. And this is the union busters tactics. This is the union buster campaign. On one hand, they're telling you how wonderful it is, and you got guys writing books because they're gruntled. They're writing books telling you how wonderful the job, how easy it is, how it's the best they've ever had, and it's the greatest thing. And they've got people that they pay, social influencers, who they pay to say how wonderful and happy they are. And then they hammer the other people with constant flyers and constant one-on-one meetings and constant captive audience meetings, constantly having supervisors gauging where they are, what they're thinking, where they're going, promising them things that, I've been a part of organizing campaigns where they say, we'll give you $1 an hour raise. We really wanted to, but this union thing has screwed it up. We're on the other side. We're going to give you that raise. And they give them the raise after, when they vote the union down. And then they raise their health care $1 an hour. So they're no better off. And then they go and they fire all the people who wanted the union because they can fire them for any reason whatsoever. And this is the country that we're in right now. So for me, the fact that Joe Biden has stepped forward and put this kind of a statement, this kind of a thing on the line, I think is incredibly important for the moment we're in. It's incredibly important for the moment we're in because income inequality is at a high. We're still worried about safe working conditions. And, we just went through a whole little period where workers were told that they were heroes. They were essential. And then not rewarded for it, not valued. I mean, think about this guy who worked for Trader Joe's during this pandemic. Patted on the back, attaboy. And then in the moment he says, hey, look, things aren't right. Things aren't safe. They toss him to the curb in the most unceremonious way possible. Here's a letter, you're fired. For doing what? What egregious act? He made a suggestion. He asked a question. And that doesn't happen in a union shop. For me, the number one reason people should join unions is, well, outside of the better wages, hours, conditions, all that stuff, is the fact that at-will employment doesn't exist. The only way you get fired is if you do something wrong. And you get due process. That's the big part for me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, comedian Steve Hofstetter is going to be here to share some thoughts on, well, the CPAC, on, well, all of the fun and excitement that is the GOP. Quick break, right back.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1990. That was the day 9,300 workers walked out at Greyhound bus lines. The 1980s devastated Greyhound workers. First, the industry had been rocked by President Carter's deregulation of the transportation industry. Then, a bitter 1983 strike ended in defeat for the workers. Concessionary contracts, deep wage cuts, and a two-tier wage system were firmly established by the time contract negotiations started in early 1990. The Amalgamated Transit Union negotiated terms closer to what was lost over the past decade. But the new owners at Greyhound would have none of it. They claimed $300 million in debt. The ATU insisted the company had been turning a handsome profit. Pickets went up at depots and garages around the country, while hundreds of scab drivers were hired. With a week's worth of training, they were soon operating 10-ton buses unsafely. Riders complained of replacement drivers falling asleep at the wheel. The strike soon turned violent and deadly. There were reports of sniper fire and bomb threats. Many charged that these were fake stories meant to spike public support for the strike. Early on, 59-year-old Robert Waterhouse was run down by a scab driver while on the picket line in Redding, California. Waterhouse had 30 years as a driver with the company and had planned his retirement for that summer when he was killed. ATU reported many more picket line injuries. Within a month, the company was operating with 2,400 replacement drivers. The company filed for bankruptcy in June. After 3 years, they would finally agree to $22 million in back pay, reinstate hundreds of drivers, and raise wages. But the number of drivers was cut in half. It would take the ATU years to rebuild its strength.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you know how much I love the stories coming out of the Capitol insurrection and the stupidity that goes along with it. Well, this one's just as good. William Robert Norwood III, yes, there were two before him. He texted the day of the big deal that he was going to dress up, look just like Antifa, and he was going to get away with it. He was going to get away with anything he wanted. So he did. He dressed up like Antifa, whatever uniform I guess he thinks they have. He dressed up in that. He stormed the Capitol. He did his deal, beat up some cops, destroyed some stuff, stole some stuff, and then texted to a friend that he got away with it. Except he didn't. On February 25th, he was arrested for violent entry, disorderly conduct, obstruction of justice, theft of government property, host of other charges. Yeah, he got away with it. And what I love is when these criminals who think they got away with it decided to broadcast their crimes. Strange times we live in. Anyway, here to share some fun and excitement. CPAC, the golden big boy, all of that. I've asked Steve Hofstetter, comedian, to come back and share some thoughts and maybe explain why. Why in the middle of a pandemic, in the winter, would you move from LA to Pittsburgh? Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick. Appreciate it.
So what do you think of these guys who constantly broadcasted their treason and then somehow are shocked when they got caught?
Well, I mean, I do understand it in a way because as we learned from the impeachment process, apparently you can't get charged for a crime if you've already finished committing the crime. So if we use that as an example, then it would seem like that guy got away with it.
Yeah, well, I hope he takes solace in that as he's sitting in prison. And hopefully he sits there for a very long time because he got away with it for that day.
Yeah, it is. Do they have access to Parler and Gab in prison? Who knows?
There is that. So let's get to the big question, the one that is on my mind. In the middle of a pandemic, you move from Los Angeles to Pittsburgh in the winter. Why?
I did. First of all, I chose the end of the winter. That was on purpose. When I put an offer on the place, they were like, "Can you do a 60-day close?" And I did the math, and I was like, "January. Let's do a 90-day close. I'll be there at the end of February. I'll take a couple of weeks of cold." I have been looking at old buildings just as a hobby forever. I always wanted to take an old movie theater or bank or church or something like that, something with just this cool old architecture, and turn it into a comedy foundation. And when I saw this one for sale, I fell in love with the building. And the more I looked into Pittsburgh, the more I realized it's such a great place to be based as a stand-up. It is within a short drive of 18 other stand-up comedy markets, and it is within a short flight of 2/3 of the population of the US and Canada. It's a great place to be based as a touring comic once touring becomes a thing again.
If it ever becomes a thing again.
Yeah.
Although, hey, good news. Texas and Mississippi, both 100% wide open.
I think Texas in particular, like the instinct as a comic is like make fun of Mississippi. But really, look at Texas because they are dead last in vaccination rates. And I chose dead as the word in there on purpose. They are not only last in vaccination rates, every day they are either first or second in the most amount of cases, despite California being a much more populated state than they are. And they're doing very, very poorly with it. So why not celebrate by doing worse? What a great idea.
Yeah, no, I got to tell you, I think Greg Abbott's going to be the 2024 Republican nominee for president. I know everyone's talking about Trump and the CPAC thing came out. I think Abbott, the way he handled the pandemic, the way he handled the Texas freeze, he's continually falling down. And as we learned during the Bush administration, you only fail upward.
Yeah, well, Radu Bandar is a comic that I tour with sometimes, and he has a joke about Texas having elected a horrible governor. And after I saw him do that joke for the first time, I just went over to him and I was like, which one do you mean? Like, it's been a couple.
Bush, Perry, which one?
Yeah, Bush, Perry, Abbott. It's almost like it's a challenge where they're like, who can we elect next? And it's getting worse every time. It's amazing that of the three of them, Bush was probably their best.
Well, I don't even know where to go with that because it's funny, but it's not even a joke.
Yeah, I actually, here's what I think. I think they're playing 3D chess because they just had this horrible, horrible failure of their utility policy and their energy policy. And they realized that because they privatized this, that, the next time they have a storm, which will happen again, that a lot of people are going to die. And they were like, how do we prevent people from dying in the next storm? And they were like, I know if they die of COVID before the storm, then they can't get killed by the storm. It's brilliant.
And again, that's not even funny, but it seems to be what it is. Now, let's get back to the church. You bought a church.
Yeah.
Obviously you can't have the church wide open yet, or can you? Can you?
No. But even if we're allowed to, we're not going to until COVID is behind us. It's been interesting because a lot of the neighbors are really interested in what's going on, and they'll stop by and say hi, and I have to just be like, "Hey, I'm not inviting you in." Like, COVID is still a thing. You're very sweet to come say hello, but you're doing it from outside and it's cold. So let's keep this short.
Yeah, leave the pie and cookies. Move on your way. Leave the casseroles. Move on your way. Right.
Well, yeah, just because of the situation that we're in, and I am very excited to eventually be able to open. And in addition to to it being a church that we're turning into this arts center, there's also a 3-bedroom home on the property as well that we're going to be housing comedians. We're using to house comedians for free. And so we actually just opened up that application process, and we've already gotten several dozen applications. And that's something that we can do before the end of COVID. And so I'm very excited about that. We're fixing the place up. I feel like I've been unpacking for 2 weeks, even though I've only been here a week and a half. And there's a lot to do, but it's going great.
So the website, steelcityaf.com. steelcityaf.com. We'll get links out on how people can check that out. So basically what you're doing is like comedy university kind of thing.
Yeah, it's something where we're creating this, live, work, play environment, but there's also going to be a great deal of mentorship to it. There's going to be, a great deal of learning to it. 2 of our board members are educators. We have an insane board. We have Elaine Boozler, Greg Proops, Josh Wolf, I Justine, Arian Foster. It's a crazy board of just, kind of who's who in social media and comedy. And, our vision is to teach the next generation to not take as many lumps as we did.
That sounds awesome. And I can't wait till things open up. And if we continue, and if we do the right things, maybe it'll be sooner as opposed to later, because Biden has said by May, we should have enough vaccine for everyone, even though I'm a big Governor Wolf's fan. I think Tom Wolf has done a good job. Little freaked out about hey, we're going to start opening things up. Don't worry about travel stuff. At this moment, I would like to have seen that a month down the road.
Well, the thing that people also forget is that if you take the vaccine and, let's use Pfizer as the example, it's a 3-week in between doses. And so if you were to get vaccinated today, you wouldn't be actually fully vaccinated because it's a 3-week dose and then 2 weeks for efficacy. So you wouldn't be fully vaccinated until mid-April. So if we have enough vaccines for everybody by the end of May, first of all, we have to distribute them to everybody. And even then, we're looking at mid-July. So it's gonna be a bit. Now, not everybody has to get vaccinated in order for us to reopen again, just enough people, but it's still gonna take a while. And at the current pace that we're on right now, we don't hit 70% until late September. Yeah. So I've been looking at vaccination stats like it's spring training baseball. So I've been.
Are you gonna get vaccinated?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's like let me
Good, so
push someone out of the way.
So you're not crazy. I'm happy about that.
No. I mean, like the people who say, "Oh, I don't know what's in the vaccine. I'm not going to put it in my body." It's like, okay, you say that while you're eating Taco Bell and drinking Mountain Dew. So shut up. Like these are the same people who take pills from strangers. So you know what? Shut up and get vaccinated.
Yeah, to me, it's that simple. Then the rest of us can have something of a normal life.
Yeah.
Or get back to somewhere near normal. I doubt it's going to be anytime soon we get back to normal, but I'm hoping soon. Because look, I'd love to go back to comedy clubs. I would love to go back to doing the things we did before Trump and the virus and all that.
Yeah, I don't think normal is going to happen for a couple of years because normal also includes international travel without quarantine. And that's going to take some time. But I think that we will get back to a shadow of normal sometime over the summer, I'm hoping.
Now, you guys have, during this pandemic, you've been doing this online comedy club thing that I think is fantastic. Tell me about it.
Yeah, Nowhere Comedy Club is the leader in the digital comedy space. We have done over 300 shows. We actually just sold our 50,000th ticket. We just had Bill Burr do a headlining set for the first time. It was the first digital show he's done, and he expressed interest in doing more, so fingers crossed that he will. We've had about 15 shows from Mike Birbiglia. We've had Ida Rodriguez and Alonzo Bowden and just so many incredible comics doing shows. Not only that, but the guest stars that stop by. We've had John Hamm and Jack Black. And I mean, it's really just been incredible because distance is no longer an issue. Every Monday night, I do a show with a comic buddy of mine in Australia. So it's Tuesday morning for him, Monday night for me. And We tour together when we can, but that's rare because we have to be able to be in the same place. But, for the last year, we've done a weekly show.
How much different is that than doing a room full of people? I gotta imagine that it's harder to do it by yourself, to do it in this virtual world than it is feeding off the people in the crowd.
Absolutely, it is much more difficult, but it's different the same way that performing in a theater is different than performing in a club, which is different than performing in a bar, which is different than performing at a college or a corporate event. Like every type of event that you perform at is a little bit different. And so digital has now just become a new performance skill. There are different types of jokes that work better, that wouldn't necessarily work as well in person and vice versa. And it's something to get used to because it's not going away. The thing that really opened my eyes to it when we were considering it back in April, I did a little analysis, and 80% of the people who follow me on social media had never been to a live show. 80% of my audience had never seen me live, and that really opened my eyes to ask the question why. And the reason is because a night out is very expensive. In addition to the ticket, you're also paying for parking and food and drink and babysitting and things like that. Also, there are some people who live in places I'll never go to. I will just simply never go to. There was a kid who watched one of the digital shows hiding under the covers on an iPad so his parents wouldn't find out because he was a 16-year-old in Croatia. And there was someone who watched from their hospital bed, and we've had a few different people watch who have severe agoraphobia and aren't able to leave the house. But this is a way that they're able to get entertainment. Yeah. So it's life-changing for some people.
Yeah, I found out during the break that you actually came to where I live in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And I thought this was a place that nobody ever came.
I did. I played the Carlisle Theater twice. Once was, opening for a bigger act in order to kind of advertise the upcoming show. And then once was my show. And I'll be honest, as much as I enjoyed it, I'm probably not coming back because it is not a large market. And for the most part now, I play large markets. And, either if you live in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, maybe I'll play Harrisburg and you can drive there. But most likely you're going to drive to Philly or Pittsburgh or Baltimore. And that's a hike, and that's a cost, and that's time out of your life. Whereas if you watch a show at nowhere, you can get there 5 minutes before the show, leave immediately after, and already be in bed.
Yeah, and not get heckled if you show up 5 minutes late.
Absolutely. And also for the performers, it has been incredible. I have dealt with one heckler in the last year.
Yeah, but whoa. But that's how I found you. That's I think what put you really on the map for a lot of us. Yeah. is that you do these really fantastic heckle videos. And look, I don't want to get on your bad side.
Well, I appreciate that, but and that's what's incredible though on these digital shows. We're not getting hecklers because the people. First of all, you're on camera for the most part. I mean, you could shut your camera off if and do it anonymously, but for the most part, there's a record of who you are. You could get banned from Zoom completely, and then you can't be a cat lawyer anymore. There are repercussions. And not only that, it's so much easier to find the person. If you're doing a theater and you get heckled, you know about where it's from. And then you have to be like, who was that? And then the bouncer has to go over and try to figure it out. And then it's really awkward to get the person to stand up and slowly leave, bring them to the lobby. Whereas you heckle in this, we see your mic light up, we know who it is, they mute you, you unmute yourself, you're bounced, game over. And then we just get to do the show. It's the best.
Yeah, and you don't need people like me. Like when I was younger, I worked as a bouncer in a number of places where we'd drag you out and we drag you out. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, we got virtual ones now. We just, people just disappear. It's the best.
I hope people will check it out. Also, the SteelCityAF.com, your new project, the Nowhere Comedy Club, and we'll get that out. Before I let you go, I got to get your thoughts on the Bob's Big Boy Golden Calf, whatever that was, at CPAC thing. Thoughts?
Well, when Mexico sends their statues, they're not sending their best. The idea that it was made of course it was made in Mexico. Of course it was. Because this fake patriotism that the right tries to claim is absolute garbage. And the everything from disrespecting the flag to praying to false idols, to the fake America First garbage. It was everything that the left already knows is true about the right, and they put it on display with no irony whatsoever, and then people kissed it and took pictures with it.
No, that was incredible. But my favorite was the magic wand. That was of the whole thing. He was holding like a magic wand.
I didn't even know that.
Like a scepter of some sort. And I'm going, it's the perfect bit. I mean, you're mocking religion. You're definitely trashing the Constitution. And then the magical thinking. I love that image, and I want one. A small one. I don't want a big one. I'd like a bobblehead one. So if someone makes a bobblehead one of those, I hope someone will send me one.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll send you half a gallon of gold paint, and I'll get you Bob's Big Boy, and you'll have it.
Well, that's the beginning, I guess. But great. No, I mean it's. I saw that. I'm going. This they've jumped the shark. I mean, this is really just CPAC is no longer has any credibility whatsoever. At one point, they did have conservative thought, and I paid some attention. Now it was just and then the Nazi symbol. Come on.
Yeah, it is a convention of conservative con men. I think it should be called con, which could be spelled with C's or K's. It's up to you.
There you go. Good stuff. Steve, I appreciate the time, man. Good talking with you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good stuff. Steve Hofstetter. Make sure you check out his work over at his website, stevehofstetter.com. We'll get links out to that. Also, steelcityaf.com. Most certainly take a look at that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1807. That was the day that President Thomas Jefferson signed legislation outlawing the transatlantic slave trade from bringing enslaved Africans to the United States. At the drafting of the U.S. Constitution, the authors had decided to revisit the question of slavery after 2 decades. During those 2 decades, the dedicated work of abolitionists put pressure on Congress to act against the barbaric transatlantic trade. Abolitionists in Great Britain also passed a law prohibiting the trade that same year. The U.S. law went into effect on January 1st of 1808. When the law was passed, 1 million enslaved people lived in the United States. The act, however, did not release them from bondage. In fact, the western spread of the cotton economy after the Louisiana Purchase ensured that slavery would become even more entrenched. The 1807 Act also did not fully end the transatlantic trade. The law did not include adequate enforcement mechanisms. Historians estimate that illegal smugglers brought in as many as 250,000 more enslaved Africans to the United States after the Prohibition was passed. In 1810, President James Madison spoke to Congress about the problem, saying, "It appears that American citizens are instrumental in carrying on a traffic in enslaved Africans, equally in violation of the laws of humanity and in defiance of those of their own country." It would become more than half a century until the question of slave labor in the United States was finally answered by a bloody civil war. From 1525 to 1866, the best estimates of historians is that 12.5 million Africans were brought to the Americas, and nearly 2 million of them died on the Middle Passage. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, Joe Biden said we're going to have enough vaccine by, I guess, the end of May for every American adult in this country, 300 million doses. And then the question is, how fast can we get it into people? How fast can we get it distributed? How fast can we get people to line up and go through the process and get us to the other side of this? Because as we were talking about in the last segment, we can't get back to normal, or whatever that used to be, until we get get through this pandemic and get people vaccinated, herd immunity, and all of that stuff. But here's the thing: I think one of the things that we did, I hope we figured out because of this pandemic, is that we need to make stuff. We need to build stuff. We need to have access to building stuff because, well, we don't have the supply chain we used to. And global supply chains, we were told, were impenetrable. Well, they've kind of broken down for us. And here to share some thoughts on, well, how we deal with this and what President Joe Biden has declared today. I've asked our good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. Scott is the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, their website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be with you tonight. And that is indeed good news about the vaccine. But obviously, we have a lot of work to do to get there from a public health perspective, but also from rebuilding our capacity to make things here. You bet.
Now, Joe Biden has signed an executive order that says that we're going to eliminate the supply chain weaknesses that we've had. Obviously, if we can't get the masks we need, if we can't get the personal protective equipment we need, like gowns or gloves or any of that stuff, I would say that's a pretty big deal and something that needs to be addressed right quick.
It's a huge deal, and we've seen a lot of headlines about that and on the business pages about the semiconductor shortage as well. And it is truly concerning because we still, fully a year into this, don't have enough of a domestic capacity to scale up N95 respirator masks for healthcare personnel, much less the general public. 300 plus million Americans. So we need to get there. With respect to semiconductors, but we simply don't produce enough in the United States. And, this is a technology that we were on the forefront of developing and perfecting and built some of the greatest companies in the world. But unfortunately, so much of that production shifted to Asia. And we're seeing, as a result of this semiconductor shortage, plant shutdowns or shift eliminations in auto assembly plants around the United States, because it's not only steel, tires, glass, that goes into an automobile. There's a lot of sophisticated electronic equipment as well. And we've discovered along the way in preparing this vaccine that we don't have a great supply chain for active pharmaceutical ingredients that you need to make vaccines and other types of therapeutics or antibiotics, for instance, or the means to deliver them, the glass vials and all of that. And so one of the things that I'm really happy to see, and executive orders sound, I guess they can sound ridiculous to some people. I think when Trump did them, he did them with a big flourish. But I think in this case, Biden is not. There's no flourish about this. This is about substance. This is meaty. This is about finding a way to identify exactly how short we are in our production capacity in some of these critical areas, and then to develop policies to remediate that, whether it's through guaranteeing markets through domestic procurement, or building up research and development or workforce, or providing reshoring incentives, or leveling the playing field on trade, or whatever we need to be doing. And so it's everything from lithium, which goes into our high-capacity storage batteries, which will be used in electric vehicles, to as I mentioned, vaccine production. And I'm excited that Biden has launched this. There'll be 100 days where they'll look at some of these very critical and urgent needs, and then a broader year-long review for things like the defense industrial base, which we've been talking about for almost a decade at the Alliance for American Manufacturing, about how important it is and how vulnerable it is as well. And the important thing is the policy that we get at the end of this. And I do believe that what I've heard so far from the administration, from the nominees that have been confirmed, and from the cabinet secretaries as well, is that there is a commitment in the administration to revitalize and strengthen manufacturing, that it's not merely kind of a campaign talking point, but I think they realize that it's very central to their strategy to have an equitable recovery and to rebuild the middle class in this country, Rick.
Yeah, no, I look at this and look, I didn't see the big signing ceremony in the Rose Garden. I didn't see any parades. I didn't see any big events. And again, this is the difference between President Biden and the former president, that this was just getting work done. And I look at this executive order and I got a question. Why wasn't this already done before? This is something that should have been done at least 6 months to 9 months ago, maybe even a year ago, as we were entering into this. We should have been examining our supply chains, examining what we had and what we didn't have, and begin to prepare us for what was coming. We didn't have those people at the wheel at the time.
Yeah, yeah, it's been disappointing, and I will say, we commissioned reports in 2012 and 2013 on vulnerabilities in our supply chains. We had a retired brigadier general do one on the defense industrial base and looked at like almost 20 different types of specific materials, everything from titanium, other sorts of specialty metals, to things like advanced batteries. And we also had, former governor, former Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge do a report on Homeland Security concerns, things like our electrical grid, for instance, which has come into new focus now. We gave these reports to the Obama administration. We gave them to the Trump administration. We got a lot of interested nods and affirmations, but very little policy change. And Trump's approach, Rick, as we both know, was to just try a big aggressive tariff approach. And as you know, I'm not afraid of tariffs. In fact, I think they should be applied, and I supported the president's actions. But there was just no strategy on the back end of that to support it through other ways, through other policy support, to actually bring those jobs back. And so it certainly disrupted trade, but it didn't have the intended effect of bringing supply chains back. So I do think that this will be a much more holistic, a much more strategic approach. But there will be some tough decisions that have to be made along the way. Things like Wall Street influence, tariffs, other questions like that, that will certainly impact our ability to be competitive and to reshore some of this work from China and other countries.
Yeah. So is this the end of global trade then? I mean, the whole neoliberal era of global trade, which is we don't actually trade things. We simply buy things that were made here that are just made somewhere else. I don't think that's trade. I think that's just buying stuff we used to make from somebody else. When I think of trade, I go, hey, Scott, I got this. You got that. Let's trade something. We're just buying stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are, I think there are perfectly good reasons to support many aspects of globalization. I think that it can be good with the right set of rules. And so I don't believe in a fortress America. I don't know that it's even possible for us to be self-reliant on everything, nor necessarily desirable. And trade does build some of those connections. But what's been missing, Rick, is the security aspect and the aspect of how working people fare in all of this, and how there has to be some balance. And the fact that you saw plants leaving in the United States that were perfectly profitable, the workers were highly efficient, highly productive, the companies were making money. They're like, you know what? We can make even more money if we exploit labor and the environment in another country. The trade rules allow us to do that. So let's go do it. And that sort of thinking is the wrong thinking. And that's what we have to put behind us. We need a trade policy that's going to put workers at the center of the focus rather than leaving them behind.
No, I'm right there with you. But, you go back to, high school economics or Econ 101, with the rice and beans. If one country makes all the rice and one makes all the beans, eventually one country has all the rice and one country has all the beans. That's not a good scenario either. And that's what I think we're getting into, that we've allowed most of our manufacturing, especially the low-level manufacturing, to go away. And it's left us really vulnerable, not just on getting things that we need, but vulnerable for the jobs that people with those skills once held that aren't there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And what we've discovered as we've embarked on this kind of experiment of unfettered free trade with a lot of corporate rights, particularly in developing markets, is that there certainly have been benefits to shareholders. There have been benefits to big multinational companies. They've made gobs of money. But what has happened at the same time is working people are in by many measures worse off. And we have fewer manufacturing jobs, and we've made ourselves vulnerable from a homeland, national, and economic security perspective through these deficiencies. We've seen a lot of environmental exploitation, and that's not a system that certainly doesn't comport with the values that the Biden team has been professing, or with their goals to achieve a more equitable, more just economy, and one that has broadly shared prosperity. And so we do need different rules. And I'm all for trade under that different set of rules. I think they certainly can be beneficial. And it would be great to build up middle classes in other countries that would buy our products made by union workers here. But that's not the system we have right now. And so we need to get there. I don't know that it can happen overnight, but I do see a different line of thinking coming from this administration, one that is very pleasantly surprising, and one that is a major departure from not only Trump, but also Obama, Clinton, and Bush. If you consider
absolutely. And since you brought that up, I gotta bring up Biden's Sunday 2-minute clip on joining unions and the right of workers to organize, which, I'll be honest, day one, when he fired Peter Robb and Alice Stock, I think her name was, when he fired them, that I go, wow, that's the most any president's done in my lifetime to help labor. But now he's come out with this video, and I got to be honest, this is a message that I have never heard from a U.S. president who was a sitting U.S. president. Obama, as a campaigner, he talked a lot about unions, talked a lot about putting on the comfortable shoes and walking the line. Never so much as president. For me, Joe Biden coming out and saying that, huge moment.
Yeah, I think it shows his authentic belief in workers' rights. And the ability to choose to join a union. And I also see that reflected in many of his appointments, whether they're at the cabinet level or within the agencies. And Rick, I can't tell you the number of folks who I see headed to the Labor Department or to the U.S. Trade Representative's office or to other agencies who have a background of working with working people. Marty Walsh as Secretary of Labor, for instance. And so that to me speaks volumes, because I know just our experience and my experience both, working for one of the progressive labor Democrats on Capitol Hill in the 90s, David Bonnier, and also with AAM here with the steelworkers, is that you can get your voice heard in a Democratic administration, but ultimately they had their minds made up about what they were going to do. And more often than not, on issues like this, they were siding with Wall Street. And so no doubt we will have those battles, and they will be fought out. But I do feel like Biden committed to have a seat at the table for workers and for working people, and so far he's met that promise. He's fulfilled it.
No, and that's great. But the question then becomes is, now when you're talking about this global situation, dealing with China and the fact that they're literally using slave labor, how do you compete with that? When we're talking about, we want people to have family sustained wages, we want them to have health security, retirement security, safe working conditions. How do you compete then with a country that is literally using slave labor?
Yeah, and I'm gonna. This will sound like a tangent, but I'll get to the point. One decision that did concern me was the Biden administration's reaction to the killing of Khashoggi, and in Saudi Arabia, or by Saudi Arabia, and MBS, and they acknowledge that he did it, but there appears to be, not a huge amount of sanction involved in this. And so, if we're going to have workers' rights or human rights or democratic ideals central to our economic policy, our trade policy, there will have to be some of those decisions made about imposing sanctions or tariffs or other sorts of penalties. And I think it's like that with, slave labor, prison labor, forced labor, exploited labor, child labor, all of which we know exists in China today, and how bold are those steps going to be to push back on that? We've seen, we've seen the Trump administration put broad tariffs on for kind of very general reasons, but then striking a deal with China on trade that was very much reflected deals that we've had in the past, and a deal that isn't going to be lived up to. So Biden has to chart a new path here.
But overall, I'll tell you, personally, I'm happy with thus far. I mean, we're not very far into this, but so far I'm happy with the direction we've gone.
Yeah, I am as well. Much of the work remains to be done. I mean, they haven't negotiated any new trade agreements. We haven't seen the infrastructure package. We don't exactly know what the procurement policy. We don't know how the supply chain will end up, or what how we're going to rewrite some of these rules. But they've laid the groundwork so that there can be success down the road. And to me, that's a good start. But now it's going to be up to all of us to do the work and to persuade them for sound reasons to do the right thing.
No, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and but at the end of it, I'm very happy with the people that he's moved into positions. Sadly, half my Rolodex is now empty because I had a lot of people who were former guests who used to come on all the time and go, "Sorry, I'm taking a job with the administration." I'm like, good for you. Go do God's work.
Well, good, and hopefully you'll get them back on the show, because I do think that they need to continue the public engagement, and that will be one of their strengths in reaching out to working class audiences and people. I think it's important to engage like that, and so the fact, as you pointed out, that the president affirmed the right to organize was pretty remarkable, and so hopefully they'll keep that up as we move ahead.
Good stuff, Scott. I appreciate the time. Appreciate the work you guys do. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Have a great one.
Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Check that out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. The Steelworkers Organizing Committee and U.S. Steel signed their first historic labor agreement. Previous efforts to organize steelworkers had failed due to the union-busting tactics of the steel mill owners. But in 1935, the passage of the National Labor Relations Act required owners to bargain in good faith with their workers. Armed with the protections of this act, the Congress of Industrial Organizations was determined to organize steel. The next year, the CIO set up an SWOC headquarters in downtown Pittsburgh, the heart of steel country. In fact, SWOC set up shop in the tallest building in Pittsburgh, the Grant Building. Many steel companies had offices in the handsome Grant Building, and the SWOC was taking the labor fight right to their doorstep. The Steelworkers Organizing Committee held rallies and sent organizers into the mill towns. They gathered 125,000 union cards in the effort. Their first big victory came when they announced a new agreement with U.S. Steel. The agreement included $5 a day for workers in northern mills, an 8-hour workday, overtime, seniority protections, a grievance procedure, and recognition of the Steelworkers Organizing Committee as the bargaining representative for the workers. Many across the country were shocked that U.S. Steel had sat down at the bargaining table. Despite this groundbreaking agreement, many of the smaller steel plants, known as Little Steel, refused to bargain with the Steelworkers Organizing Committee. 1937 was marked with bloody battles to unionize Little Steel. 10 workers in Chicago lost their lives. Yet, momentum was in the workers' favor. Finally, in 1941, Little Steel capitulated and came to the bargaining table. The Steelworkers Organizing Committee had won union rights for steelworkers across the country. In 1942, the SWOC disbanded and became the United Steelworkers of America.
There is a weasel word that politicians use whenever something goes wrong on their watch. Unacceptable. We just heard it slither out of the mouth of Texas Governor Greg Abbott in response to the state's failure to prepare for a killer winter storm. What happened this week to our fellow Texans is unacceptable, he fumed. Well, yes, Gov, but wait, aren't you the guy in charge? Ignoring that little detail, Abbott pointed his outrage at ERCOT, an agency charged with administering electric policy in Texas. But wait again. Those policies are set by the Public Utility Commission, a corporate cozy body that has failed for years to mandate that the state's for-profit utilities weatherize their power generators to prevent freeze-ups. And who appointed the members of that commission? Why, Greg, it was you. In fact, 2 of the 3 members of PUC are former top staffers of the governor. Also, Abbott has been governor for 6 years, and not once has he proposed legislation to require that the corporate owners of electric utilities protect the grid from freezes, as is commonly done in North Dakota and other sub-zero icy places. But, he claims, this year's storm was unprecedented, so it couldn't have been anticipated. Oops, wait again. A notorious rolling grid failure in a 2011 snowstorm left millions of Texans in deadly darkness, a disaster that was also called unacceptable. But then Abbott and other GOP officials did accept it, quietly refusing to require winterization, even as they accepted big campaign donations from those corporate giants that caused the breakdown. Yet, we're now treated to the clownish spectacle of Abbott demanding a legislative investigation and calling for heads to roll. This is Jim Hightower saying, but wait once again, isn't he head number 1? Stay in touch. Sign up for the Lowdown's free weekly email. Did I say free? Yes. Get yours at hightowerlowdown.org/email.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're living one of those moments where virtual unlimited corporate power meets crony capitalism. Some call it fascism, some call it good business. We're seeing what happens when outweighted corporate power and a government system that, well, bought and paid for it. As I've said a number of times, we do have the best democracy money can buy. This is one of those stories. This should have been the David slays Goliath story, but sadly Goliath has somewhat come back to life and used, well, our power and our institutions against him. And here to share his story is that should have been that David. I've asked Stephen Dodzinger to come talk with us. Stephen's an environmental lawyer. You may remember back in the mid-2000s, there was all that stuff around the Amazon, and Chevron and Texaco being sued. There's all those lawsuits. This was the guy that was behind it. And that's why I've asked Stephen Donziger to come talk with us. Stephen, thanks for taking time for us.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with where you are right now before we go back and through this whole incredible story. Right now, I understand you've been locked in your house for, I guess, a year and a half. I mean, all of us have been kind of locked away, but you've got a court that says you got to go, you got to stay home.
Yeah, this is my 19th month of house arrest without trial on a criminal contempt charge that's filed by a judge that was rejected by the prosecutor's office. It all stems really from Chevron pushing the judge to try to lock me up because of the successful work of our team, you know, my work and the work of other lawyers in the United States, Ecuador, and other countries to hold Chevron accountable for what's probably the worst oil-related pollution on the planet, including the dumping of billions of gallons of toxic oil waste down in Ecuador on indigenous ancestral lands from like the mid-60s to the early 90s. So, you know, the people of Ecuador, the indigenous groups won the case in 2011. Chevron retaliated by filing a racketeering lawsuit against me in New York, and not just me, but all 47 named plaintiffs, the villagers down in Ecuador. They engineered it to a particular judge who's a former tobacco lawyer, industry lawyer. He denied us a jury and basically ran what we think was a show trial where Chevron paid a witness $2 million to come in and claim that we had bribed the trial judge in Ecuador, which was completely false. This witness had been coached for 53 days by Chevron's lawyers before taking the stand. Later admitted lying, has no credibility, and 29 different appellate judges in Ecuador and Canada have affirmed the validity of the underlying $9.5 billion judgment against Chevron. So Chevron was trying to really weaponize this trial judge in the U.S. to try to evade paying the people of Ecuador the money they owe for the pollution. Ultimately, we kept pushing forward and won a bunch of positive court decisions in other countries, including Canada, to try to seize Chevron's assets. And at that point, Chevron's New York legal team went back to this judge who had shown animus toward me and others, and asked to see my computer and cell phone under really what I think is a bizarre theory that they had a right to look at my confidential case information. And ethically, I couldn't do that. So I appealed that order. And while that order was on appeal and is still on appeal, the judge charged me with criminal contempt and had me locked up. That was in August of 2019. It's a misdemeanor charge. There's not a single other person in the United States locked up even for a day on a federal misdemeanor other than me. In my mind, it's a corporate attack where in this case, Chevron and its lawyers have taken control of a certain segment of our federal judiciary to try to, confiscate my passport, which they have done, prevent me from traveling to do my human rights work, and to punish me and hold me up as a symbol. I'll say this, very important, is the judge, his charges were rejected by the SDNY, the federal prosecutor in New York. So the judge then went ahead and appointed a private law firm to prosecute me in the name of the government. And this private law firm, the name of which is Seward and Kissel, has a client relationship with Chevron, as well as several oil and gas related entities that have ties to Chevron. So I'm basically being prosecuted in the name of the government by Chevron and locked up.
And you go, how is that possible? Because I mean, to narrow this down into a real simple soundbite, you had a civil court. The civil judge charged you with a criminal complaint that the District of New York wouldn't prosecute. So a private attorney group was brought in to prosecute you, and you've been locked away for a year and a half on something that you probably would have at maximum spent 6 months in jail for. This is unbelievable to me. It's one of these stories that you go, this can't possibly be true, and yet everything I see absolutely is true.
Yeah, it's unprecedented and it's scary because, no matter what you think of the United States of America, we at least aspire to live by the rule of law. And that means that your prosecutor needs to be disinterested, not have a financial conflict of interest. It means the judge needs to be unbiased. And I don't have that in this case. I mean, this is basically, as David Sirota wrote in the American Prospect, this is the first time that the government has given big oil the power to prosecute its main critic. So, this is bigger than me. I mean, I'm suffering. I live here with my son and my wife, my 14-year-old son. It's just ridiculous. And they won't let me out. They claim I'm a risk of flight, like I'm going to flee to Ecuador.
Where are you going to go? I mean, this is your fight. You have, as I was reading through this, and I'll be honest with you, I guess I don't have the kind of intestinal fortitude that you have, because at some point I give up on this. And I think virtually anybody else who's gone through what you've gone through would probably go, enough of this. But this has been your life's work since 1993. You're not, I seriously doubt you're going anywhere.
Well, I'm not going anywhere, and it's a pretext. As a matter of fact, when I was charged criminally by the judge, I was already out of the country, and I came back. So obviously, I'm not a risk of flight. They also imposed an $800,000 bond on me, which was put up by some friends. And I'm locked up. And I will say that the 4 cops who killed George Floyd, 3 of the 4 have lower bonds than me, and they're out right now, waiting trial, free. Many of the so-called insurrectionists, the white supremacists who stormed the Capitol, rioted, committed acts of violence, are out. I won a huge pollution judgment against Chevron on behalf of indigenous peoples, and I'm locked up. Total double standard. And it's really the power of Chevron and the oil industry as exhibited in this case. People need to, awaken and understand that I think it's a dangerous threat to our democracy, our civil society.
As I was reading through your story, and it's an incredible one, and I hope people will look deeper into the work that you're doing, I kept coming back to this thought of, how is it you're not just laying in a field somewhere? How is it they didn't just have you killed? Because we hear those stories everywhere. It seems that would have been much simpler than you destroying our entire judicial system to just prosecute and persecute just one person.
I don't know what to say about that. I mean, you see what goes on in this industry when you really do work that, threatens the interests of it at a core level, which I think this case does. Not just because of the monetary judgment, but just because of the idea of this case. The idea that, communities in other countries who are also victims of pollution would, figure out how to connect with talented lawyers in the United States and Canada and, get money. This requires an economic model to raise the money to compete with Chevron, which spends billions of dollars on legal fees. So, they don't like the idea, the concept, the paradigm of people around the world uniting, from the Amazon to courtrooms around the world to hedge funds who help, or donors, wealthy donors who help finance this kind of human rights work. They want to destroy the model of the case. They want to kill it off. And that's what they're trying to do here. I mean, I don't think at this point, I don't think they're going to be killing anyone. And I take what you're saying because, there's a lot of human rights activists around the world and lawyers who have been murdered by, for doing environmental defender work in other countries.
No, the reason I bring that up, Stephen, is I've interviewed people from Colombia who are labor activists. And the stories they tell of being pulled off of buses and shot in the head, having seen people that happen, having seen labor leaders thrown out of airplanes. This is not, we're talking about Ecuador and, maybe not here, but we're talking in places that you've been that you could be pretty vulnerable. So I got to be honest, it's got to be something you've thought about.
Well, I am vulnerable. I mean, I'm 19 months without trial, locked up in my house, and I did nothing wrong, in my view, other than to litigate successfully against Chevron. So,
but here's the thing, Stephen, there's a massive groundswell of support right now. I see, aspiring attorneys and all these human rights groups and all these activist groups who are coming to your defense and to your aid to try and get this overturned, and all the attention that's coming with it. I mean, this is growing, and the message is still getting out, and that's got to be on some level really inspiring to you to keep this fight going.
Well, it does. I mean, it's solidarity, and I never, of course, you always understand solidarity, but until you really need it, you don't really understand it like I do now. I mean, I've had 55 Nobel laureates have issued a statement demanding my release. 13 major human rights groups led by Amnesty International just wrote a letter to the U.S. Department of Justice demanding that they take the case back from the private law firm and dismiss it. Hundreds, thousands of lawyers around the world have signed on to my defense committee. So, I just spoke this week at Stanford Law School, and a bunch of students wrote a letter to the law firm that's prosecuting me, saying they're going to, they organize a national boycott from 52 law schools for students who are refusing to work at this law firm in protest of their unethical prosecution of me. So there's a ton of stuff happening. Judges have lifetime appointments, and one of them is a member of the Federalist Society, which is receives significant amounts of money from Chevron and oil and gas interests, and they just don't seem to want to move on it. I mean, they're just trying to steamroll me, but we have a lot of leverage too, and we're going to keep pushing.
Now, here's the thing, and I look at the work that you and your team has done, and it's my view that what you've done is what governments should be doing. our government should be holding Chevron accountable in our name. We shouldn't have to have Stephen Donziger, put his life into this and then be a political prisoner in his own home. We shouldn't have to do this. We should, through our government, a government of, for, and by we the people, we should be doing this stuff for ourselves.
I think that's right. I mean, I think the role of plaintiffs' lawyers generally in our society is outsized because the government is not, regulating our society in the way that it should. So there's a balance between capital and workers, and, there's a basic social safety net. So, when a corporation can pretty much, pick its own judge and, have its law firm prosecute its main critic in the name of the government, that's just really unbelievable.
No, it's something that we expected in a third world country like Ecuador. And as I understand, when you guys started this suit, you wanted, it began here in the U.S. and Texaco wanted to take it to Ecuador, where they then lost. I mean, this is the weird twist of this story for me. They got what they wanted. They were on their home turf and they still lost because it was that bad.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they insisted the case be heard in Ecuador. The Ecuadorian communities wanted it heard before a jury in the United States. Chevron was petrified of a jury, so they accepted jurisdiction in Ecuador just to get it away from a U.S. jury. And once we got to Ecuador, they claimed that they weren't going to accept jurisdiction. So they denied the people a jury in the underlying case. In the RICO case against me, the judge denied me a jury, and now they're trying to deny me a jury again in the criminal contempt case. So, the people going after this case and after me do not like juries for obvious reasons, because once anyone hears the facts, they almost always side with us.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Stephen Dodzinger, environmental lawyer, U.S. political prisoner over his suing of Chevron and ultimately winning. Here's the thing that gets me. I saw you were featured in the documentary Crude. And, as I'm watching through this documentary, you see these horrible conditions and you see these people who are just, they're just overwhelmed. I mean, babies with all kind of these bizarre rashes, people with all of these cancers. I don't know how you can look at that and go, there's not a problem that this corporation caused. And ultimately, I'll say as well, the Ecuadorian government has a lot to do with this as well, in my view.
I agree with that completely. I mean, look, the primary culpability lies with Chevron and Texaco. Ecuador's government made money off of the operation, never regulated it properly. But there was really only one operator in Ecuador, and that was Chevron. The government was a passive investor, and Chevron was the operator because they had the expertise to do it properly without systematically dumping billions of gallons of toxic waste into the environment. There's a lot of responsibility for this, but the primary responsibility is with Texaco and Chevron in our view, and also the court's view.
Now, you were on the ground there an awful lot. I guess one of the questions I had, did you learn to speak the language because of this case or before this case? Because, as I watched you in this documentary, you spoke the language fluently.
Yeah, I studied Spanish well before I got involved in the case, but, traveling to Ecuador, I've been there over 250 times, and working in Spanish, I learned Spanish. I had to be able to work effectively in Ecuador. But, interestingly, a lot of the client base speak native indigenous languages. They don't even speak Spanish, so one of the challenges when you're an advocate and a lawyer on a case like this is to connect up people from different cultures and different backgrounds. I mean, the gulf can be really wide, so it requires a huge amount of organizing and sort of social skill and emotional intelligence to be able to sort of pull together communities in the rainforest and have them work effectively with, Western educated lawyers from the North. And, I think that's frankly one of the things that terrifies Chevron is that we were able to pull not just me, but lots of people worked on this. We're able to pull this team together, couldn't have done the case if I didn't speak Spanish. I mean,
no,
obviously.
because
No-
but here again, I go back to this documentary where some of the images were heartbreaking. I mean, especially these children who, you know, they don't have any opportunity because of the environment in which they live in, and then to hear the executive from Chevron say, oh well, you know, it's because they don't have sanitation, and to throw it off in some flip manner. I mean, I can't imagine what your eyes have seen. I was heartbroken just seeing what I saw in that documentary.
Well, it's, yeah. I mean, you know, my last trip down there, I toured the affected area, and, you know, almost everyone, there's almost nobody who doesn't have some family member who's died of cancer. You have babies, you know, dying of leukemia, like 6-month-old babies. You know, you don't see leukemia in babies, okay? You know, leukemia is a disease that manifests in adulthood, often with people who smoke. So how does a baby get leukemia? I mean, the fact is these people are being exposed, you know, hundreds of times a day to cancer-causing oil waste in their food, in their water, in the air. And babies are particularly vulnerable because their immune system isn't developed yet, but everybody's vulnerable. And if you keep getting exposed over time, you end up, it's likely you're going to get cancer and potentially die. You know, and also there's a real lack of medical care. I mean, there's people who get cancer, say a tumor, and because they can't get to a doctor, the tumor will just grow. I mean, you know, to literally enormous proportions, like a basketball size out of the rib cage of a person, you know, stuff you would never see in the United States or most countries, because people, you know, even if they're suffering, they get treated for these diseases. You know, it's hard to know the precise number, but we estimate thousands of people have died because of this. It's one of the world's, you know, worst humanitarian crises. And because it's happening slowly and incrementally, people aren't like waking up to it. You know, I will say this, when BP had that accident in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010, they immediately put up a $20 billion fund, and ultimately they paid $65 billion in compensation and fines. This judgment we won is $9.5 billion. And it's for a far worse oil spill, one done deliberately. The BP spill was an accident. Texaco and Chevron did this deliberately to save money, and they refused to pay even a penny, and they lost the case. You know, and I think we have to recognize there's a certain colonialism and a certain maybe structural racism in how the courts up here think about Ecuador. You know, Ecuador's Supreme Court and Constitutional Court both unanimously affirmed the judgment, as did Canada's Supreme Court for purposes of enforcement. And the only thing against that is one US trial judge who ruled without a jury based on this, in my opinion, false testimony by a paid Chevron witness. So how does one guy, who he never looked at the evidence in the Ecuador case, come up with a decision that a lot of the media in the United States pays more attention to than the collective wisdom of 29 appellate judges in Ecuador and Canada who have validated the judgment? I mean, it's extraordinary if you think about it.
No, it absolutely is extraordinary. But sadly, we're insulated here in the U.S. from the tragedy that you witnessed. That doesn't happen here, and I think your example is a good one. That they spent, you know, an enormous sum of money to clean up what was an accident, but what was decades long of deliberate destruction, nothing.
But you know, it's not like it's costless for Chevron. They've used 60 law firms and 2,000 lawyers.
Yeah, but is it still cheaper to pay the lawyers to go after and attack you? Because here's the thing, and this is where, if they lose in Ecuador, don't they then have to pay everywhere else? I mean, aren't you then setting the precedent for everywhere else where they've destroyed things?
I think they've calculated that to be the risk to them. Yeah, I don't think there's that risk. I think that there's a real rational argument for them to pay the judgment or settle the case, you know, but it's almost like they're on a crusade. They are attacking the very people they poisoned with spending, I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars in legal fees on dozens and dozens of law firms, on hundreds of lawyers. If you took all that money that they're paying for all these lawyers, experts, consultants, scientists, and actually put it in a fund to clean up, you'd really be able to do a lot of good for a lot of people, and you would probably save yourself from reputational harm that they're currently experiencing. But it seems to them like this is like war. And I think it has to do with the fact the industry is in decline, you know, and they want to extract every last dollar of profit they can. And the last thing they want to do is set a precedent by paying, you know, indigenous leaders in the Amazon significant funds to clean up the pollution they caused.
Is it possible, honestly, is it possible for the oil companies to get any worse of a reputation? I mean, I don't know salvaging their reputation is a reason why they're fighting this. Because I don't think, or at least with most people I know, I don't think you can get a much worse reputation than they have.
Well, I think that's a good point. But I will say that often they will show up in other countries and try to act like good citizens to do deals and get access to supply. So sometimes, you know, being known as a real polluter or known as a company that ignores court judgments can put them at a competitive disadvantage around the world. So while I agree they don't care that much about their reputation, I think they assume it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
No, you know, this kind of stuff can factor into business risk and business decisions.
No, I remember a year and a half or so ago, I interviewed an author, a guy named John Perkins. He wrote the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And, you know, he was talking about going around the world and using the U.S. government to do the bidding of these big corporations. This is right in line with the exact same thing. You've got, you know, the U.S. court system who's protecting these global corporations. And I got to assume they're making huge profit off of it somewhere. There's got to be someone to push back against this. And this is where I'm hoping the movement that you're creating and the people that are in this free Donziger movement will be the ones who shine an even brighter light on this. But again, I look at our political system, Stephen. We're so divided, so broken that I don't even think if you came out and all of this stuff was dead spot on true, our political system could even come close to fixing it.
Well, you know, you got to try, right? And, you know, we're fighting for justice for tens of thousands of people in Ecuador and also justice for the planet. You know, this is intimately connected to the climate crisis. I mean, if you can't do this kind of work to force companies to clean up their pollution, how are we ever going to, you know, save the planet? So it's all connected. You have to keep pushing, keep trying. I mean, obviously some people suffer. The people of Ecuador are suffering. You know, I'm suffering, my family's suffering. It's hard to watch, but it's happening because we won the case. The Ecuadorian communities won the case. We have to remember that. We cannot let them define what happened here. Okay, the people went to court as they were supposed to, and that Chevron accepted jurisdiction. They presented evidence, 64,000 chemical sampling results of Chevron's pollution of their lands, and a court appropriately applied, you know, looked at the facts and applied the law and found Chevron liable. They won the case, and they can't handle that. And that case has been validated by the Supreme Court of Ecuador and the Supreme Court of Canada. So why do they come back to a trial judge in New York to attack me? Because they don't want to pay that judgment, and they're trying to use it as cover to distract people from what really happened, which is their own, you know, their own guilt, their own culpability for, you know, poisoning the Amazon and really hurting and killing a lot of people. So, you know, we won, our side won, we will keep fighting. Yes, the US government has some structural problems in terms of its favoritism toward corporate power. I mean, we all know that. It's been a slow multi-year process of, you know, of entities like the Koch brothers and others who have really laid out a ton of money to make that happen.
And the Supreme Court.
In the Supreme Court, and it doesn't mean every judge in the federal system is like that. They're not. There are some good judges. You know, there's two judges who got onto this case who I believe are not, you know, complying with their duty to be fair and neutral. That's a really nice way to say it. I mean, it's actually much worse than that. So we have to keep trying. And it's the only thing we can do, but people need to wake up to this. And by the way, can I just say something? If people want to help, how they can help?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, you know, there's a couple of ways to help. One is I have a defense fund called DonzigerDefense.com, Donzigerdefense.com, one word, where you can make a donation, or if you can't make a donation, sign on anyway. You can sign on to our campaign. We're getting a growing email list, and every couple of weeks, we send out updates about the case, which often contain things of action that people can do to help. So go to DonzigerDefense.com. The other thing is a bunch of organizations are putting out a new video about the case in the coming days, and trying to raise awareness of the need to make me free again. Look for that. And if you see it on social media, please send it around. And you can find me, by the way, I tweet a lot about the case. I'm on at @Donziger on Twitter, SDONZIGER. Try to follow me on Twitter. You can get a lot of information about the case.
And we'll make sure we get links out on social media to make sure people take a look at this, and also throw some donations to DonzigerDefense.com, which you see on the screen as well. But, this is one of those moments where I keep coming back to, we shouldn't have to be begging for donations to do what's right. But I hope people will dig deep and help, because this is much bigger than just you. And I think you alluded to this earlier. If they're able to silence you, it's more than just Stephen Donziger. It's about anyone ever going after a corporation ever again. And especially since I brought up the Supreme Court, we have a 6-3 corporate Supreme Court right now that overwhelmingly sides with corporate interest. So if you look at this case and, well, the future that's coming, it's bleak if we allow this to stand.
Yeah, I agree. It's all connected, and we have to fight for our rights. I mean, all advocates, all corporate accountability, environmental justice advocates, indigenous rights advocates, human rights advocates are in play right now, because the playbook they're using against me can be used against anyone else. So we have to really take a stand here collectively. It's very important, in my view.
Stephen, I wish you the best. I hope folks will go to DonzigerDefense.com, follow you on Twitter, and help out in any way they can. And I wish you the best, and I hope you'll come back and talk with us again once this is over.
Anytime. Thanks so much, Rick. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks so much, Stephen Donziger. Again, DonzigerDefense.com. We'll get links out on social media. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
As the bitter cold eases, the big problem now for many remains access to water.
Water crisis persists in Texas and Jackson, Mississippi, 2 weeks after winter storm. Latinos disproportionately exposed to worst water in U.S., new study finds. Plus,
this is a textbook example of this kind of information and influence campaign in operation.
As cities move to electrify buildings, the natural gas industry is striking back.
All of that news from the Empire and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I don't know about you, Trey, but my car doesn't run off fairy dust.
No, but your political ideology does, Senator Kennedy.
My car doesn't run off unicorn urine.
No, it runs off the same thing your campaigns do. Big oil. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, this storm in the South passed almost 2 weeks ago now, and yet folks are still paying the price for it?
Oh, yes, they are, sadly. As we go to air, in Texas, nearly 400,000 people across the state are still under boil water advisories, more than 2 weeks after that extreme winter storm pummeled large swaths of the South. Repairs for burst pipes and water mains are hampered due to a shortage of licensed plumbers and materials across the vast state.
I'd love to pummel large areas of the South at this point.
But getting much less attention is the full-blown water crisis in Jackson, Mississippi. Residents there are entering their third week without water because the city's aging, underfunded water system was not built for such extreme storms. Much of the city has no water at all due to no water pressure, leaving many residents with no clean drinking water to bathe, cook, or even flush toilets. Officials don't know when the water will be restored and have mobilized water tankers to neighborhoods, but the most vulnerable residents can't reach them. system. The Daily Beast reports that the water outages have disproportionately affected predominantly black areas of the city. Jackson is just one of many municipal water systems around the country that are teetering on the edge of failure due to lack of funding for maintenance and upgrades.
You know, it's also the capital city of Mississippi. You would think they would want to take care of the people who live in their capital, but I guess too many of them are the wrong color.
And according to a new analysis, millions in the United States are drinking water from systems that violate limits for dangerous contaminants or fail to meet federal health standards, and Latinos are disproportionately exposed. That's according to a new analysis of Environmental Protection Agency data conducted by The Guardian of more than 140,000 public water systems across the U.S. The analysis found that counties that are 25% Latino or more violate drinking water contamination standards at twice the rate of predominantly white counties in the country.
Well, they should move.
The Biden administration is preparing another broad stimulus package to fund such long overdue repairs to U.S. infrastructure, but that's after the passage of the COVID relief bill. But Senate Republicans have indicated they will oppose it, like they opposed a similar trillion-dollar infrastructure package just last year. Speaking of COVID, President Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID rescue plan passed by the House on Friday with 0 Republican votes. It will provide $4.5 billion to the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which helps families afford utility bills, and it allocates $100 million to address health disparities from pollution and the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's if it passes the Senate.
Well, no wonder Republicans don't want to support it.
In other news, buildings are one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions that cause dangerous man-made climate change. So Seattle, Washington, in February joined a growing number of cities updating their building codes to ban polluting natural gas in some new building construction. However, as cities are taking action, the natural gas empire is striking back to maintain its dominance and its profits. The American Gas Association is battling growing attempts by municipalities across the country to electrify buildings, including launching influence campaigns with advertising and payouts to social media stars to promote natural gas, and lobbying state legislatures to pass preemption laws that block cities from banning natural gas.
'Cause freedom and small government and all that.
Scientists say that electrifying buildings and switching away from natural gas reduces indoor air pollution, and the bottom line, it is also one of the most efficient ways to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 to combat climate change, according to Princeton energy researcher Aaron Mayfield here in an interview with NPR.
We cannot continue using natural gas for things like heating and cooking because it's not consistent with reaching a net zero goal.
So there are more big battles ahead as the fossil fuel industry mobilizes to maintain its grip on the country.
And they are very good at maintaining that grip, at least until they can't any longer. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, I gotta be honest. In looking at the story of Stephen Donziger, and it's an incredible story. I spent the weekend just reading as much as I could about just what it took to get that case to trial. Just the fact that it went to court to begin with was a Herculean leap, and how Texaco wanted it to move it from the U.S. because originally they had filed it in New York, I guess, and Texaco goes, no, we need to go there. They got it down to Ecuador, where they thought that they could bribe judges and they could do all the things that they're claiming that he did. And this is one of those scenarios where you got to go, is it that they're projecting what they were trying to do and what they were doing onto them, and they assume that he did it better, which is why they're really ticked? Because how the story that I'm reading goes is, they pulled out all of the stops. And ultimately, they were guilty because the videos that I saw, as I said in the interview, there's a great documentary called Crude that I had to rent and watch that just walks you through a portion of this battle. And that whole awareness campaign that came about during the Bush era and all of that stuff that was going on, it was a remarkable victory. I mean, think about it. A couple of small time law firms were able to take on this global behemoth and win. I mean, this should have been that David and Goliath story. And for Stephen Donziger, it's turned literally into a nightmare, which I hope folks will make donations to his defense. DonzigerDefense.com. We'll get links out so you can do that. A couple of bucks will help. Because ultimately, it's more than just about him. And he, as he said, it's more than about him. It's about what corporations are going to get away with. Understand, our judicial system has been rigged for decades, and they've been the Trump years hyper rigged. Our Supreme Court is a 6-3 corporate court. People say, no, it's a conservative. No, it's a corporate court. Overwhelmingly, this Supreme Court decides on the side of business. There was a study done like a year or two ago that said, actually it was two years ago, that said that, like 75% of all cases that the Chamber of Commerce weighs in on, they win. When corporate interests are at stake, they win. And what does that mean for the rest of us? Well, that means we lose. Worker rights out the window. I mean, think about some of the big Supreme Court cases that have come out that mandate forced arbitration clauses, that end the ability to file class action lawsuits for consumers, for workers. Janus, that made the entire country a no rights at work country. I mean, you think about the decisions that this Supreme Court has made. It's all been on the side of corporate power. It's all to swing that pendulum even further to the side of big money. And that should scare everyone. Look, this stuff, we like to believe could never happen here. They would never be able to get away with the kind of horrible things that they got away with in Ecuador. Basically just digging ditches and from the way this movie made it look, digging ditches and just dumping the oil waste into them and just leaving it. Slap a little dirt over it. Nobody will know. And then people build their communities on this. And some of the cancers and some of the rashes and some of the things these people had. And then, no ability to get medical care. I mean, it's a horrible, horrible, tragic tale. And it's one of those things where you go, well, why didn't they just pay the judgment? It would be good PR for them. Why? Because this is one place that they've been. As he pointed out, when we had the accident down in the Gulf, when the oil well down in the Gulf exploded and all that oil went to the shore, Exxon spent over almost 65 billion with a B dollars to clean that mess up. And they're not going to pay $9 to settle this and make it go away and hush it out and put it under the rug. Why they won't pay the $9? Because they know there's another one and another one and another one, because they've done this all across the globe. They've left environmental destruction wherever they've gone. That's the reason. And I keep coming back to the sane, rational view of this. Of when you see this stuff laid out in front of you, when you see the facts of this that I've been reading about and seeing, you can do nothing but be appalled at the fact that we have allowed big business to run and destroy not just our country but our globe. And there's nobody to hold them accountable. And as I said to him, I said, isn't what he did what governments are supposed to do? Aren't governments supposed to be big enough and powerful enough and at least have the resources enough to take on someone like Chevron? Aren't we supposed to hold them accountable? And then for me, it's all during the Trump years, I was saying, we've got to stop this deregulation stuff because this is what happens. The idea that they're going to police themselves, the idea that they're going to do what's in their best interest. Well, yeah, they're going to do what's in their best interest. They're going to figure out how to squeeze the quarter till the eagle screams. And if that means pushing off all their external costs, like their waste and their pollution and all, and their cancers on somebody else, well, so be it. That's somebody else's fault. They should have moved. And look, I actually had someone tell me that. Why didn't those people just get up and move? Where? With what resources? And, what other poor communities? Because look what we do to poor communities in this country. We never put an oil refinery in the good address area. You never see the giant oil tank surrounded by $1 million homes. No, you see it in poor areas, the places that we've left behind, the places where we lock our doors driving through. That's where we put that stuff, and those people suffer not like they do in Ecuador or in other places like that, but we do it here too. And this is what corporate America has gotten used to. And when they say, well, we don't need any regulations, they'll police themselves. They know that, are they going to really police it? Let's think about it this way. And I think about myself, and I'm going to use myself as a perfect example because I have done it. And I'm going to admit to something that I think the statute of limitation is well over. I think it's long past me getting in any trouble for it, especially now with, trucks being all computerized. But when I was driving a truck, and of course we didn't have computers in them, if I knew there was no cop at the bottom of the hill, we're going down the hill at 100 miles an hour. We're going to open it up and straight downhill as fast as it'll go because help us up the other side. Did it a bunch of times. It's the reason you have the CB. Hey, any Smokey's ahead? No, let her rip. I knew there wasn't a cop ahead, so what did I do? I broke the law, and not just a little bit. I'm talking, a set of wagons rolling down the hill, 110 miles an hour, in open gear. Say yes, it's stupid, and it is. But it's what you did. It's what you got away with. Because you knew there wasn't anything, there were no consequences at the bottom. Now, sadly, there could be consequences at the bottom because I'll tell you the story of when I stopped. It was a beautiful Saturday morning. I remember it like it was yesterday. This is going back 20 years. I'm coming down a big hill on 80 up north in Pennsylvania, and I'm going down the road with a garbage hauler next to me, and we're literally hauling what. And I'm hitting 90, 95, 100 in open gear. Georgia overdrive for the old timers. And all of a sudden I see brake lights of a car in my lane, way up ahead. Then I see reverse lights. Somebody's backing up on the right-hand lane on the highway. Reverse gear, backing up. Evidently missed the exit, had to get to the mall, had to get their Orange Julius on time. And there was no way I could stop. There was no way I was going to be able to stop. It was physics, an impossibility. So I ended up going around on the shoulder between the car and the guardrail. And as I looked down, I saw a 5-year-old kid's face plastered against the window. And it was that moment I swore, never again. Never going to do that again. Because that family would have been killed instantly. I would have spent probably the rest of my life in jail. It wasn't worth it. Had that not happened, probably would have still done it. Had I not had that moment of near accountability, probably would have kept doing it. And this is why I know corporate America, knowing that even if they would have killed that kid, would have gotten away with it, they're never going to change. They're never going to stop. They're never going to stop being reckless. which is why they have to be regulated, which is why we have to have control. People, I hear, the Republicans are job-killing regulations. What about these people who are dying of these cancers? What about these people whose lives are cut short? What about them? I know, they don't count because they don't have big bank accounts. And this is one of those moments where, look, I'm definitely not proud of what I did. But I can say I didn't kill anybody. Can Texaco and Chevron and these big oil companies, can they say that? Can these huge chemical companies who, well, pollute at will, all in the name of profit? Hey, well, we got to have it. And I know there are going to be people who say, Rick, it's a trade-off. You got to have the oil because we got to need our plastics and we got to heat our homes. We got to do all this stuff. How many people, and this is the justification that I love hearing. How many people would die without it? That's not the argument. The argument is we can do better. We must do better. And we must hold people accountable when they don't. That's what this is about. Is it somewhat about Stephen Donziger? Absolutely. The justice system is screwing him over. But the bigger picture beyond this is what happens if there's no accountability? Do you want to be at the bottom of that hill doing something stupid like driving backwards on the highway and having someone like me railroading down the road into you? And then know there's no accountability at the end of it? I mean, that's the amazing part of all this, which is why they must be held accountable. And we must get Stephen Donziger freed. Free Donziger is the hashtag everyone's using. DonzigerDefense.com, the website to donate a couple of bucks to help fight the battle that's coming for him and his family. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. And yes, you can send me all the emails going, I can't believe you did such a thing. You were such a nice guy. Why would you do that? You get paid by the mile. Another thing that I'm against. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1807. That was the day that President Thomas Jefferson signed legislation outlawing the transatlantic slave trade from bringing enslaved Africans to the United States. Drafting of the U.S. Constitution, the authors had decided to revisit the question of slavery after 2 decades. During those 2 decades, the dedicated work of abolitionists put pressure on Congress to act against the barbaric transatlantic trade. Abolitionists in Great Britain also passed a law prohibiting the trade that same year. The U.S. law went into effect on January 1st of 1808. When the law was passed, 1 million enslaved people lived in the United States. The act, however, did not release them from bondage. In fact, the western spread of the cotton economy after the Louisiana Purchase ensured that slavery would become even more entrenched. The 1807 Act also did not fully end the transatlantic trade. The law did not include adequate enforcement mechanisms. Historians estimate that illegal smugglers brought in as many as 250,000 more enslaved Africans to the United States after the Prohibition was passed. In 1810, President James Madison spoke to Congress about the problem, saying, "It appears that American citizens are instrumental in carrying on a traffic in enslaved Africans, equally in violation of the laws of humanity and in defiance of those of their own country." It would become more than half a century until the question of slave labor in the United States was finally answered by a bloody civil war. From 1525 to 1866, the best estimates of historians is that 12.5 million Africans were brought brought to the Americas, and nearly 2 million of them died on the Middle Passage. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, FBI Director Christopher Wray testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee and basically told us what we knew. There were no Antifa people at the January 6th insurrection, except for the guy who was pretending to be the Antifa person. Dressed up in whatever, and this is what gets me. I mean, what exactly is the Antifa uniform? Do they have a membership card? Are they really an organization that has a uniform? Now, I know what the white supremacist uniforms look like. They got those white hoods and the white outfits with little pointy tops. I get that one. And I get a lot of the militia types because they usually like to say that they're in the militia. But I've never seen the Antifa one. But like that guy, he thought, hey, I'm gonna be whatever he thought that. That's how he got caught. There isn't an actual uniform, and he thought there was. Anyway, Christopher Wray said that there were none, and that it was criminal behavior, plain and simple, that the FBI views as domestic terrorism. He went on to say that the siege was not, and I highlight not, an isolated event. The problem of domestic terrorism has been metastasizing, his word, across the country for a long time now, and it's not going away anytime soon. I'm glad he realizes that, because I've been saying that for a very long time, that we've got this crazy movement in this country, that's under the undercurrents with this gun culture and all of the stuff that promotes this. There are those who want to refight the Civil War. And I tell the story when I first moved into the area that I now live in. The guy who used to live behind me, and thank goodness he left, had a cannon in his living room. And he, one day, the first and only time I ever talked to him, I asked about the cannon. And he gave me this long dissertation about how, the South was going to rise again, and he's a Civil War enactor. First time I ever heard that. He was a Civil War enactor, and that they enact the battles, not reenact them, because they change them so that they get the right outcome, which I thought was weird. And the only two words I said when he left was "good, bye." Happy to see him go, because way out there. I didn't have the heart to tell him that you can't change the history. You can't change how those battles were fought, because we got different weapons now. But, he loved his tank. I mean, he loved his cannon. It was what it was. But there are those who still think, we're going to refight these battles, and we're going to have another, South's going to rise again. I've heard that stuff for years. But there are actually people who they're plotting. And I'm glad that Christopher Wray has figured this out. They now say that they have analyzed more than 250,000 tips and have arrested more than 300 people related to the attack, and that there are more coming. So if you were there, you haven't gotten away with it yet. Maybe here's a good idea. I got a really great idea. Maybe get on social media right now and say, hey, I got away with it. How about that? So if you were dumb enough to go in our Capitol and defecate on the floor or urinate on someone's desk or steal something, here's another idea. If you stole something off Nancy Pelosi's desk, put it on eBay. Put it on eBay. Maybe you'll get a buyer. Or maybe you'll get a new place to live in three squares and a cot. Maybe you'll get that. And finally, today, Neera Tanden has withdrawn her nomination for OMB head, and President Biden accepted it. You knew this was coming. Wasn't surprised. We'll see who he comes out with after this, because, you just weren't going to get Manchin and the others to vote for her. So that is what it is. But big show today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stuff that we covered. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. Hope you'll go to DonzingerDefense.com. Throw Stephen Donziger a couple of bucks to help with the defense. This is a battle we need to fight. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.